Welcome to Dark Corner's United States of Horror poster special. We've picked movies set in every state of the good old USA to give you a poster-based tour of America, from the great and the good to the wild and the wacky. There's horror everywhere, starting in... I don't think it's going to come as a massive shock to regular viewers to learn that The Conjuring is not really my sort of film. But I really like the poster. Partly because I like old trees and, while I don't think it's a deliberate reference, it does remind me of this shot from silent horror The Student of Prague. I like the atmosphere, I like the ambience, I like the sullen greyness of it, I like the implied threat of the noose just hanging there. It looks like the opening scene of a late-era Hammer film. But what I really like is the fact that I liked this poster for its atmosphere long before I noticed the clever bit. Totally in keeping with the style of the poster. Insidious, subtle, unnerving. All things that, to be honest, I found completely absent from the film itself, but the poster is so good, I feel like I ought to give it another try. And if a poster can do that, then it's one. Carrie, by contrast, like the movie, never actually read the book, don't like the poster. I don't like its aesthetic. I've always preferred painted posters. I don't like either of its taglines. But let's come right down to it. Who wants to see a poster which has a before and after of the movie's biggest moment? I know it's based on a book, but that still seems like a monumental spoiler. I may be wrong, but my gut instinct is that this was dictated by someone who really wanted to hit the horror, because they got cold feet about a film that's generally about a 16-year-old girl going through some typical 16-year-old girl things, and horror film's perceived market is predominantly male. So, let's just stick some blood on the poster and hopefully they'll come along anyway. It's a great image, of course it is, but it has no place on the poster. The film deserved better. The Brain Eaters is a film we reviewed several years ago, featuring an early role for Leonard Nimoy, and it is terrible. The poster, however, I think is pretty cool. The yellow, glowing eyes, the mouth of vampirically sharp teeth. Her head seems to have been partially shaved to allow for that irregular chunk of skull to be removed, bearing the brain and letting out shards of telepathic power. It's a great picture of an arresting image that evokes the movie in no way whatsoever. I don't think any of this has anything to do with the story, especially the vampire fangs, to the extent that I do wonder if this was a picture repurposed from somewhere else.
Inundating our world, twisting the emotions of women, distorting our men.
The artist was Albert Callis, and if you have a favourite B-movie poster, chances are he painted it. And honestly, you'd be better off staring at his back catalogue for 60 minutes than you would watching the film. Designed by Kurt Volk, the first thing to say about the poster for Death Proof is that, unlike the Brain Eaters, it completely fits the movie. Whatever you think about Quentin Tarantino's film or the Grindhouse Project in general, this is perfect for it. If someone told you that this was a genuine Grindhouse movie poster from the 1970s, I think you'd believe it. The colours, the font, it exudes that cheaply printed mass market feel. It's got a great sense of speed and a great sense of sleaze in the 8 girls across the top. But you don't see anything, they're just silhouettes. And that too feels like the essence of the Grindhouse movie poster, promising that there will be more. Just wait till you see these girls in the light. It's just a great piece of movie artwork, and would that more designers were given this sort of lassitude in mainstream cinema, rather than it just being used as a gimmick. But my favourite thing, and it's just a little thing, is the headlights, where it looks as if the ink has just been scrubbed away to create the illusion. Couldn't be more simple, couldn't be more effective. Florida was the stomping ground of godfather of gore, Herschel Gordon Lewis, so we had to pick one of his posters. Normally, I don't like a lot of text on a poster. I think the image should do the work. But Herschel Gordon Lewis sort of has to go this route because you can't put pictures from his movies on the poster. More importantly, he wants you to think that you can't put pictures from his movie on the poster. They won't let us. Our movie is just too extreme. So there's a pretty strong image, albeit in monochrome, to catch your attention so that you read the text. You'll recoil and shudder as you witness the slaughter and mutilation of nubile young girls in a weird and horrendous ancient rite. You won't. You'll laugh and go "ugh" a bit as red paint is poured onto actors who never made another movie. And look here. If you're the parent or guardian of an impressionable adolescent, do not bring him or permit him to see this motion picture. Translation: if you are an impressionable adolescent, you want to see this picture. Also note, it only says him, not her, leading those impressionable adolescents onto the next bit of text. Introducing Connie Mason. You read about her in Playboy. Because everybody bought Playboy to read about Connie Mason. The picture is just a head. The text says nothing, but it mentions Playboy, so you know what you're going to see. Except you don't. The movie is lousy. The marketing is close to genius. At its essence, a poster is a marketing tool, and although, as Herschel Gordon Lewis demonstrates, there can be some benefit to misleading people about the content of your film, if you want long-term success, what you want is a poster that sums it up. This is the flip side of the gore coin. Few posters manage to be as concise as that for 30 Days of Night, and no one came out of the movie saying, "Well, that wasn't what I expected at all." It's not just the in-your-face colour choice or the starkly rendered vampire face thrusting forth. Even the crude writing feels like a statement of intent. This is going to be visceral, relentless, primitive. You've been told, you've been warned. After the all-too-real horrors of his attempt to film the island of Dr. Moreau, detailed in the documentary Lost Soul, it had seemed that Richard Stanley would never direct another movie. So, Colour Out of Space is a cause for celebration, as is its poster. Like many, we harken back to the days before poster design meant just how big can we make Johnny Depp's face, the days of the painted poster, and this is a stunner. Executed by Thomas Hodge of the Dude Designs, it defies analysis. There is so much going on. This wild, Lovecraftian chaos that somehow also manages to be a thing of almost geometric precision. And, fittingly, its use of colour is second to none. It's not just that this is a symphony in pink, a phrase I so seldom get to use, it's that its treatment of colour, the gradations between pink, violet and midnight blue, create something otherworldly out of colour alone. Look at this and explain to me why big studios still prefer Photoshop. It's safe to say I am not in the target demographic of Vampire Academy, and I haven't seen the film, so I can't comment on its quality, but damn. If ever there was a poster that reflected everything I hate in modern poster design and everything I loathe in modern vampire movies, this is it. 4 pretty, pouting white people with moody expressions and excellent hair without any suggestion that they have character, personality, or a thought to share between them. It says nothing about tone, story, or themes, and yet, weirdly, looking at it, I feel like I've seen everything the movie has to say. Also, and again, haven't seen the film, so for all I know this is integral, I find the lavender backdrop really weird. I don't mind the tagline, which is at least better than the one on the other posters, which add nothing but an emphasis on short skirts, but this is the thing about posters. If I heard the name Vampire Academy, I might go to the trouble of finding out more, because I can certainly imagine a film with that title that I would like. But seeing the poster, I would just avoid it. Of course, others would be the other way around. Again, I'm not the demographic. My point is, horrible poster. We're trying to make sure there's a bit of variety in this countdown, so here's a comedy horror for all the family. Goosebumps.
Nobody make a sound.
It's got quite a cool premise. The monsters emerge from the books of Jack Black's R.L. Stine, the author of the real Goosebumps series, where they've been kept safely locked up within the pages. I wouldn't say it was necessarily my sort of film, but I've got time for anything that plays on the innate power of books, and that's reflected in the poster as the monsters are swept up out of the pages in a stream of magic. Now, I do wonder if some of the monsters are rendered a bit too scarily for what is ultimately a kids' movie, and you'll notice at the bottom the army of garden gnomes keeping this light-hearted. If I was a parent looking at it, I might wonder if the movie was more cutesy gnomes or more scary werewolf, but there's no denying that it's eye-catching. It's not a classic by any means, but it's a solid example of movie posters doing what they're supposed to, catching your attention and keeping it. As it turns out, not a whole lot of horror films coming out of North Dakota, but there is Leprechaun. What I know about Leprechaun: Warwick Davis from Out of Willow, Jennifer Aniston a year before she stopped taking jobs like this because she got a sitcom gig. What is there to say about the poster? Well, there's the Leprechaun, prominent presence of green, and a tagline: "Your luck just ran out." I like to think that after they'd come up with that, the person responsible poured themselves a drink, put their feet up and thought, this was a good day. "1976's Squirm" is a film we've been asked to review on many occasions over the years, and I've got to be honest, this is as close as we're going to get. Reason being, I've started watching it several times and it does make me squirm. There's something about that movie that just repulses me, and I think the poster sums it up really well. If a psychiatrist asked me to draw my feelings on the movie Squirm, this is what I would come up with if I could draw. It's a poster of writhing images, worms, corpses, the twisted trunk of the tree. Even the font of the title looks like a trail left by some invertebrate. It's icky, which is good because it tells you what you're going to get in the movie, and this is not a film you want to go into cold. Also, I think it should be said, this is a great piece of movie poster art by the great Drew Struzan. It doesn't tell you what you're going to see in the movie, but it does give you a good sense of it. Unlike pretty much any modern movie poster, I would call this art. Not art I'd have on my wall, but art. Okay, so Snakes on a Plane was not predominantly set on Hawaii, but part of it was, and it was either this or Dino Croc versus Supergator. Snakes on a Plane was famously the film that changed how movies were promoted, the first film to really harness the awesome power of the internet. It's a film that was sold more or less completely on a title and on Samuel L. Jackson, and on the fact that he was vocally annoyed by the presence of all these darn snakes on the plane. Not happy about it at all.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane!
And I think all those selling points are reflected in the poster. There's the snakes, there's the plane, there's Samuel L. Jackson's name. It might just as well be called "It's That Movie You Heard About." This isn't really a traditional poster. It's not doing what traditional posters do in promoting the movie. They already did the promotion. This is more like a post-it note on your fridge to remind you that you wanted to see that film. Incidentally, the design is based on the caduceus, or staff of Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and is often mistaken for the rod of Asclepius, which is the symbol of medicine. I'm not sure if that's relevant. Set in Alabama, 2013's Oculus has an impressively creepy poster. There's a few things I like about this. Most obviously, that body horror always has the ability to make us go, "Ugh," and this is no exception. Secondly, it's interesting how much hiding the eyes can change a person's face, and star Karen Gillan has quite distinctive eyes, so this becomes her and yet not her. And I think it's quite a bold decision to disguise your star's face right there on the poster. It's also an image that works well with the tagline, "You see what it wants you to see," because immediately that makes us wonder, what is she seeing behind those hands? But I think maybe my favourite thing about this poster is that maybe there's a bit of a subliminal thing going on here. From the dawn of horror film, people have sat in cinemas watching from behind their hands, peeping through their fingers, "Can I look yet?" And there's just a sense of the designer saying, this is how you're going to be watching the film. Brightburn is one of those posters where you think, yeah, it's good, but what else could they have done? If you're putting a dark spin on superhero mythology, then that's got to be reflected in the poster, and this does a good job of advertising and selling that basic premise by recreating a classic superhero pose, but with a real sense of threat. What's interesting about this is that superhero movies are generally getting darker, and if this was the basis of the next Superman poster, you wouldn't be all that surprised. Even taking all that into account, I think the Brightburn poster has a subtle menace all of its own. The tattered cloak that seems to drip the darkness itself, the bright glowing eyes, and small detail. Brandon's legs are in a classic Superman pose, but his arms are held differently, almost like a zombie. There's something about his posture that says, this is not a nice man. It's really well done, but if you are going to do a superhero movie, there is another route to go. The Swamp Thing was an unlikely DC comic hero made into an unlikely Wes Craven film, and while it has its fans, I think the general view is that it's not a great film, but has Adrienne Barbeau in it, and the poster is certainly not shy about showing that selling point. It's also a very cool poster, designed by Richard Hescox, and a conscious decision to pay homage to the film's comic book origins. I think it captures the atmosphere of the Louisiana swamp, and that is the most thoughtful swamp monster you will ever see, which speaks to the film's tone. I think they could have made the title a little bigger, but I get that they didn't want to detract from the main image. The screenshots down the bottom, however, just strike me as someone losing confidence and insisting on photos, because who wants a painted poster? Every film fan I know, that's who. And Yeah, I do kind of wish that Brightburn had gone more this route. When making a sequel, especially a belated one to a film as well known as Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, you can't avoid the comparisons, so you have to lean into them. The poster for 2019's Dr. Sleep does a great job of acknowledging its illustrious predecessor, but still looking forward to something new. To film fans, the bright yellow colour is an immediate callback to the original poster, and the ragged split through which Ewan McGregor peers instantly recalls one of cinema's most iconic moments.
Here's Johnny!
But the look on the face of the young Danny Torrance as he stares out at us is all about this movie. Why is he looking at us like that? Smaller thing, but I also like the fact that they haven't aped the font of the original. It's a poster that acknowledges where it came from, but still manages to be its own thing. Me and reboots, reimaginings, belated sequels, we don't get along. Maybe it's my fault, maybe I'm not trying hard enough. So initially, I had very uncertain feelings towards Ghostbusters Afterlife. I wanted it to be good, and I wasn't sure that it would be, and then in the end... yeah. But looking at the teaser poster now, it takes me back to a time when anything seemed possible. Partly because it was scheduled for release in summer 2020. But also because it's a poster filled with nostalgia. Ghosts always seem to come from the sky in Ghostbusters. The setting, the fact that this is our Oklahoma pick, not New York, obviously isn't a poster decision, but boy does it work. There's a sense of them having been in the wilderness, coming back when we need them. I love that Ecto-1 is looking a bit beaten up and crappy. Ghostbusters shouldn't be slick, they were always ramshackle and thrown together. But what I still like most about this poster, despite subsequent disappointment, is one little detail. The clouds of corn dust and exhaust behind the car. They are speeding to the rescue, because though they might not be as young as they were, when you've got a disaster of biblical proportions, human sacrifice, cats and dogs living together, who are you going to call? Iowa finds me torn. The movie we've chosen is the 2010 remake of George A. Romero's The Crazies, but which poster? This is an interesting case study because this is a really striking image, but it just doesn't speak of the film to me. I understand its relevance, it just doesn't sum it up. By contrast, I'm not crazy about this poster, although maybe that's just 2020 talking, but it does a better job of summing up the film. To me, that infectious aspect was really important, and the first poster just doesn't touch on it. Truth be told, they're both perfectly adequate posters, but it's interesting to me that two such different posters can work for the same film, albeit in different ways. Examples like this really make me respect the job that poster designers do when they're given a blank sheet of paper and told to put something on there that sells the film, that sums it up, but without revealing too much. Off you go and do that. It's not easy, and when it works, it's not easy to say why. Convenient for us that they come from different states. The poster for George A. Romero's original The Crazies is one that, for me, really does sell the film. And it does so by largely ignoring the rules of poster design. And why not? It's supposed to be crazy. For the record, I have been told that yellow is the most noticeable colour to the human eye, so that's a good point to start for any poster. But this is a shade of yellow we might call panic. It's almost high-vis, and it contrasts well with those black and white images, making the poster seem like an official warning. There's panic, there's violence, there's these negative images that might represent the world turned around, and of course there's that brutally stark figure in the centre of it all around whom the panic ferments. He's in a uniform, so he might be official, but we can't see his face. Whose side is he on? He seems to be aiming at us. To me, it encapsulates the old joke. It's not paranoia if they're actually out to get you. This is chaos, but to me, it sells the film in a way that the posters for the remake simply don't. Okay, so Washington DC isn't technically a state, but for all those who think it should be, and because it's nice for people who already watched our advent calendar to get something new, we're including it. Plus, any reason to talk about a Ray Harryhausen film, and Earth versus the Flying Saucers is an oft-forgotten one because there are no creatures, just the saucers themselves, designed with Harryhausen's typical eye for detail. What do we like about the poster? Well, I actually do like the title being emblazoned across an outline of one of the saucers. Obvious, yet it works. I like the fact that there's a fleet of flying saucers here, which budget prohibits in the finished film, and that slightly roughed-in background that makes what matters stand out all the more. Surprisingly, I like the dominant presence of the aliens, who frankly underwhelm in the film itself. But I think my favourite thing is the decision not just to show the dead, but to highlight them. They really stand out. Posters of this sort, you always see destruction. You very seldom see the aftermath, and this makes it look like a proper struggle. Earth is the underdog here. Stephen King is a rare writer whose name is more important than any of the filmmakers attached to adaptations of his work, and the poster for Children of the Corn puts that name front and centre. And in case you don't know who he is, oh, that's Stephen King. The central image, bold against a red sky, has become synonymous with a series that has long since moved away from the original.
Bring him the blood of the Outlander!
Praise God! Praise the Lord! Praise God! Praise the Lord!
And there's a reason for that. Even if you haven't seen the film, this seems symbolic of it. And what other image would you use for a horror film with corn in the title? It represents sacrifice as much as it does the agricultural theme, and it ties those themes together. Interestingly, I haven't mentioned the glowing-eyed children in the corn at the bottom, and to be honest, until I sat down to examine the poster, I don't think I ever even noticed them. I don't think they're a problem, I just don't think they matter. Honestly, the poster for Stephen King's Sleepwalkers looks more like a book cover to me than a movie poster, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because in 1992, I doubt many movie posters looked like this. It's not subtle, but it's not meant to be. It's a Stephen King film. It's horror. Especially if you don't like cats. I like the low angle. I love the use of colour. I like the sheer number of cats scampering towards the house as if they were rats. I also like the patch of moonlit sky obscured by a paw, and I wonder if it can be read as an eye, or even an eye being scratched. But my favourite thing is the green light in the window of the house, because it flips our perception a bit. If it was a soft yellow light, we'd say that the cats were attacking. But that green makes the house itself seem insidious. So, if the cats are attacking, then whose side are we on? And if they're not, are they going home? You'll have to watch the movie to find out, and that sort of intrigue can really sell a movie. The poster for The Return of the Living Dead had to do something that no other poster in this countdown had to do. As well as being clear on the movie that it was selling, it had to be clear what movie it wasn't selling. Here's what happened. George A. Romero and John A. Russo Both wanted to make sequels to the 1968 classic Night of the Living Dead that they co-wrote, but had different ideas. They settled this with the idea that Romero's sequels would be the Dead series, starting with Dawn of the Dead, and Russo's would be the Living Dead series, so they could both go away and do what they wanted without interfering with the other's series. Russo wrote The Return of the Living Dead as a novel, which was made into a film by Dan O'Bannon, who, to further differentiate the series, introduced the idea that Night of the Living Dead was a film based on real events within the world of his film.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
So, along with everything else, the poster for Return of the Living Dead has to say, not Night of the Living Dead. I think designer Carl Ramsey nailed it. The Return of the Living Dead is a more comedic take with a rock and roll ethos, and that could not be more front and centre. Zombies with a punk attitude. But it's still horror. I really like the corpses in the background and the spectral figures beyond them. I just think it's a great poster. There's probably only one state in this countdown where you might be able to guess what film we're going with. Texas. No, but seriously. Imagine yourself back in 1986. You're a horror film fan and you've just heard that the most seminal horror film of the 1970s is getting a sequel. Maybe this was the film that got you into horror in the first place because that first death was like mind blown. And the original director is on board. If they can replicate the tension of the original, this is going to be the horror event of the year. Then you saw the poster. I can't decide if it's fiercely brave or shoot yourself in the foot insane, and that kind of goes for the movie too. We're reviewing the poster, not the movie, so two things worth saying. One, that is a poster for a horror comedy. It tells you what you're going to get. Two, it does tell you what you're going to get. Given the status of the original, they could have easily traded on that legacy to get you in the door and then dropped this completely unexpected film on you. But they were honest. Some might say they did worse things to the film's legacy than trade on it, but they were honest. And I do respect that. We had two options for our Maryland poster. Number one was The Galaxy Invader. And if you thought Don Dola spent nothing on the movie, then wait till you see the poster. Not the biggest issue, but the apostrophe in its is wrong. So we went with another low-budget film. This one did slightly better at the box office, and the punctuation on the poster is flawless. I guess the poster's not doing anything special, but it does sell the film. It's a film about fear in the woods. Everything else is a mystery, and I like that bold use of black space. It's also a rare poster where I think the relatively long text actually works because it makes it seem more like a documentary, and although we all know now that it's not, back in the heady days of 1999, before found footage was a thing, they were able to market this like it was real. Let's also take a moment to appreciate that single use of colour. It's details like that that sort the men from the Galaxy Invaders. Cards on the table, The Legend of Boggy Creek is not the best film we'll be looking at in this countdown, but it is perhaps better than its reputation, which has been tarnished by unofficial sequel, Return to Boggy Creek, and official sequel, Boggy Creek 2 and The Legend Continues, both of which are bad enough to drag the original down with them. As for the poster, I'm not sure it reflects the film, which is a faux documentary that now looks like a Blair Witch ancestor, but maybe it captures what producer-director Charles B. Pierce wanted to convey: mystery. This romanticised image of a Bigfoot-esque creature is what everyone in the movie is hunting for, but it remains elusive, unattainable, maybe no more than a fable. And that is captured here. It's a picture that tells a story. It's also a picture by the great Ralph McQuarrie, the man who practically created the look of Star Wars for George Lucas. So this is kind of Chewbacca's ancestor. The posters for sequels are always interesting because they want to speak to that built-in audience who enjoyed the first one, but also want to say, this is new. Similar enough that if you liked the first one, you'll like this one. Different enough that if you liked the first one, you still need to see this one. On the poster of the original Tales from the Hood, the skull has one gold tooth. On the poster for the sequel, point made. This is an anthology film, and there's a sense of these stories being presented to us, as well as reflecting the stream of dark humour that runs through those stories. The original was groundbreaking, using horror as a way to talk about issues confronting the African American community, but still very much an entertaining horror film. The sequel arrived more than 20 years later, and I do feel that there's a sense that things have moved on. There's a bit more affluence, it's a bit more fun, but there are still issues to be addressed, still stories to be told. We may not be as groundbreaking as we were, but we're still here, and that's the point. Without wanting to sound more like a grumpy old man than I usually do, attention spans are shorter than they used to be, and that does have an effect on movie poster design. If you want people's attention, you have to grab. Excision is a grabber. It helps that this very deliberately looks like an alternative and not wholly inaccurate biopic of Elizabeth I, and there is a reason for that in the film that I won't go into. Once it's got your attention, then you notice the details of the costume that reveal this probably isn't a period drama. You might only then notice the chair because the black leather blends into the background, so the bright studs stand out, making it seem almost as if this young woman is holding a pair of stylized phallic symbols, and again, I'm thinking that shape is very much deliberate. In many ways, this does what a modern movie poster has to do. Time was when you might see a movie based on the poster alone, but now you're more likely to look it up on IMDb. There's no point in being misleading on the poster when we go in with so much knowledge, so all a poster can do is grab your attention. A lot of people will be instantly put off by this, but those people weren't coming to see the movie anyway. It's a numbers game. The more attentions you catch, the more likely you are to find that audience. There were a fair few giant bug films in the 1950s, usually with nuclear energy responsible, and most of them B-movies in varying shades of shoddy, but there is one standout. Veteran director Gordon Douglas took a B-movie premise and delivers a sharp, enjoyable film starring the ever-reliable Edmund Gwenn. It's a movie that proves special effects don't matter because there must have been a conversation when someone said, what are we going to do about the eyes because they look really weird without them? And I think they made the right decision because in the film you don't really notice it. On the poster, however, I mean, it's classic and God knows it's eye-catching, just a bit cartoony. Also, I sort of feel like they hired an artist who didn't really know what ants look like because they seem to have gone out of their way to hide the ants' bodies, even on the landscape version where there was enough space. But why complain? This is a poster that does what the movie did. It brings the B-movie into the mainstream. Moving from killer creatures in New Mexico to killer creatures in Idaho, we're looking at the poster for The Being. Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, it turns out not that many horror films have come out of Idaho. This is a 1980s throwback to the 1950s B-movie in which a mutated monster attacks a small town. And I don't seem to have anything... Oh shit, yes I do. The film is an 80s throwback to the 1950s B-movie in which a mutated monster attacks a small town, and I will say the poster does sum that up. I don't seem to have anything else to say about it. There's one good reason to look at the poster from the horrendous Wicker Man remake.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah!
Okay, two good reasons. It gives me an excuse to show this poster from the original. Great, isn't it? Although I have to admit, it has no connection to Washington State, and we're stuck looking at this one. And in some ways, it's not dissimilar. There's the effigy of the title in the background, and it has the same tinting-ish, but it lacks the monolithic pagan grandeur of the original, replacing it with Nick Cage, and all I want to do is yell out, "It's behind you!" It's probably not the worst poster I've ever seen, but the truth is, the film is so bad, it's very hard to be objective. The point is, this is just a movie announcement. A great poster does something more. We've cheated a little here by stepping outside of horror to visit its neighbour, science fiction, but for this, why not? It goes without saying that Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a brilliant film, but this is a brilliant poster. I like its sense of emptiness and of scale, but what I really like is that the movie is a journey, like The Wicker Man. All the characters are on their way somewhere to something, they don't know what. And while the road is a very basic metaphor, it's also a very effective one. And don't forget, the aliens are on a journey too, and that's mirrored in the stars above the road. The use of the vanishing point is exceptional. The stars too get smaller as they approach that luminous glow on the horizon. It sets up an air of mystery, and there's a nice juxtaposition between the image and the tagline. We are not alone, but this is a very lonely image. I'm not so keen on the other poster that seeks to explain the title. That to me smacks of a lack of confidence. To many, it is a mysterious title, and it's a mysterious poster, but it's for a mysterious film. Sci-fi comedy horror Sliver has a different take on aliens and got a lot of mileage out of its grisly aesthetic. It's a movie that leaves you feeling like you need a shower. Not a bath. Definitely not a bath. All the posters for this focused on the same scene because the designers knew what they were doing. It's about vulnerability, a situation where we are naked and helpless. And yes, it does also confirm that there's a pretty girl in the bath. Huge respect for the American Beauty style poster. Just great, and really hitting the vulnerability. But my favourite is this simpler one. It's less overwhelming, but I think that makes it scarier because it's less exaggerated. Stuff like this is always playing on our fears, and while you will probably hear a whole bunch of these coming, one seems almost believable. Also important is the specific trajectory, again playing on where we are most vulnerable. Finally, this is a bathroom. Ordinary, domestic. There's a curtain, a vinyl floor, a towel that looks like it's been used. It could be your bathroom. Unless you're Marvel, when a series starts, you can't really predict how long it's going to run, and sometimes the posters can tell a story all of their own. The posters for the Friday the 13th franchise can be split into two, based around the iconography of the central character. Spoilers, Jason Voorhees doesn't actually feature very much in the first Friday the 13th film. The killer is a shadowy figure, their identity a mystery, which I think the poster captures, along with their focus on the small group of teens. The next two films follow the pattern of the shadowy figure with the bloody weapon. By the fourth instalment of the series, the franchise had already reached its final chapter, and the killer had become an icon of the horror pantheon who could clearly be identified on the poster. This became a new recurring motif when the series was rebooted a year after its final chapter in The New Beginning, and over the next 20 years that motif remained for a further 6 films, the Mask of Jason becoming a brand that means far more than Friday the 13th itself. The remarkable story of a horror icon told in posters. We have covered Matthew Peake's great poster for Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street in our 25 Great Horror Movie Posters video, but the film had another poster designed by Graham Humphreys for its UK release, which is also great and for a lot of the same reasons. A Nightmare on Elm Street was a game changer in mainstream horror, and yet it arrived with such confidence and such a certainty of what it was. Firstly, this is such a great summation of the film. The street, the sleeping girl, the bladed hand seeming to become real, indicating that this may be a dream, but it can still kill you. The colours are great, blue and yellow, you can't go wrong. But also, note the tinging of red on the street itself. This is where the blood flows. But what's really impressive is that in our first glimpse of Freddy Krueger, he already seems like an icon. Characters like this are usually kept under wraps in the run-up to the movie, and it's time and familiarity that make them iconic. But this is a poster that seems to already know that here is a character who will be in the zeitgeist for the foreseeable. Shot at Lake Havasu, Piranha 3D is a film you can only judge by the rule of, what did you expect? And I think that goes even more for its sequel.
Tell me you did not replace our old lifeguards with strippers.
Water certified strippers.
Double the D's. Piranha 3 Double D.
It also goes for the poster. The Piranha franchise is known for two things: killer fish and girls in bikinis, both of which I think are covered. More or less. This is a remake of the '78 original, which added 3D to the mix, and I think that's also covered. In fact, I don't think I've seen a 2D poster do a better job of selling 3D. Also worth noting is that this is a direct reference to the poster for Joe Dante's original. The girl is more relaxed now, and our bikini technology has come on in leaps and bounds, but even the Lilo is the same. I also think it's a less obvious reference to the alternative poster. The massing piranhas with chiseled teeth and glowing red eyes definitely look familiar. There's not a lot else to say, but I think I got a lot of mileage out of that, all things being considered. Sometimes, when you look at B-movies specifically, it can seem like the better the poster, the worse the movie, and there is a reason for that. The worse your movie is, the better poster you need to sell it, to counteract the weight of negative word of mouth coming your way. So, with that in mind, how bad does the giant spider invasion have to be to warrant a poster this good? And this inaccurate? Just so we all know what we're talking about, here's the spider in the film. Uncanny. Also, you'll note the second spider on the poster. There's only one giant spider in the film, unless they mean this one. Also, the film takes place out in the country, not in the city, with smoking buildings, arc lights and car crashes. As a piece of marketing, it's brilliant, over-promising, massively and guaranteeing a disappointed audience, but that doesn't matter. The audience of the giant spider invasion was always going to be disappointed. As an image, it's brilliant. It's better than modern posters for something like eight-legged This spider has 10 legs. Following up Get Out was never going to be easy, and credit to Jordan Peele for not just making a carbon copy of his groundbreaking debut. 2019's Us went in a different direction while sticking with Peele's mandate of horror with a social message, and the poster isn't afraid of shouting both. While the film did divide audiences, I don't think anyone would deny that this is a fantastic poster. The sheer terror in Lupita Nyong'o's right eye is palpable, but because of the position of the mask, it appears that her left eye is looking back at her, which adds a whole other level of insidious. The details are so clear and so specific that they raise questions about the movie. What is the significance of the glove or the red shirt? But in the end, this is a poster that plays on that feeling we all have sometimes, regardless of race, that we are wearing a mask, and sometimes underneath we are screaming. I suppose I am in two minds about the poster for Jennifer's Body. It is pretty crass as an image. I like the hand coming out of the desk, but that's really the only thing that even hints at this being horror. I don't think it accurately reflects the story or the tone of the film, or really anything beyond the fact that it has Megan Fox in it and she might be wearing a short skirt. At this point, I think you might as well call it Megan Fox's Body and have done with it. On the other hand, I would imagine this was a pretty successful tactic. For me at least, Jennifer's Body wasn't a great film. The comedy and horror never married comfortably. Other opinions are available and equally valid. Although it didn't do as well as expected at the box office, the film by no means tanked, and I'm tempted to think that this poster is a large part of the reason. It did what it's supposed to do, so I can't criticise. But I don't like it. I don't think it's selling the movie, it's just selling tickets. A little like the film itself, there are things I like and things I don't like about the poster for 1975's The Stepford Wives. The first thing I don't like is the short novel at the top of the sheet, summarising really the first half of the movie, when all you need is the single line, "Something strange is happening in the town of Stepford," and that excellent image that does such a good job of summing up the concept of the movie without giving anything away. It's a picture of shattered perfection beneath an impossibly blue sky, staring out at us, blank yet somehow enticing. The woman has been broken, apparently with violence. She's obviously the victim, and yet there is a veiled sense of threat. As an image, it's a mystery, and that's what you want going into a film like this. The less you know, the better. While it is, of course, an Alfred Hitchcock film, the fingerprints of legendarily interfering producer David O. Selznick are all over Spellbound.
Don't forget this man. He has plenty to do with the terrifying mystery that causes this glamorous woman to risk her life and reputation in a reckless experiment.
He edited much of the Hitchcockian humour out of the script and shortened the film by 20 minutes, leaving a movie that Hitchcock himself was always dismissive of. According to biographer Patrick McGilligan, for Hitchcock, the primary allure of the film was the opportunity to give cinematic life to the dreams that help unravel the amnesiac's identity. Hitchcock wanted to do dream sequences that went beyond dry ice and soft focus, and hiring Salvador Dali to do those sequences was on the cards from early on, another area where producer and director differed. This long preamble is my way of saying, for Hitchcock, this film was all about the visuals. Here's the poster. The central couple could be from any love story, and while the tagline hints at something darker, I don't think it really hits it. As for the side image, it's been a while since I've seen the film, but is it possible they're surveying a road? There was a point in a room where decisions were made and someone said, yeah, this sums up the film for me. I don't think Spellbound is anyone's favourite Hitchcock film, but it's better than this. The poster for Tucker and Dale vs. Evil certainly hits the basics of the movie. It's a comedy slasher, and here are our leads in typical unhinged hillbilly maniac poses, and yet somehow tongue-in-cheek. I like the shadowy backdrop and the figure of the real killer there in the background, with these guys set against it as a tonal counterpoint. And although Katrina Bowden in her underwear is a little gratuitous, it is an integral part of the plot and certainly an integral part of the genre that they're spoofing. It's all there, and yet somehow I can't shake the feeling that it's just a bit uninspired and that the film deserved something more fun. It's very posed, and Tucker and Dale vs. Evil had a sort of rough and ready charm that I think would have translated into a more entertaining poster.
This is a suicide pact. These kids are coming out here and they're killing themselves all over the woods.
Oh my God, that makes so much sense.
I feel like I'm being too hard on it because, like I said, it's all there, but it feels like it's just rocking up to do the job. Most movies have multiple posters, and it's always interesting when one has become iconic and the others haven't. Check out this poster for Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes. I actually think it's a little funny. It's an intense situation. Someone is being threatened, but the expressions on their faces don't scream horror. This one is perfectly fine, a more literal take on the title, but it just doesn't stay with me. Hard to say for sure why this one does. It doesn't have the intense situation of the first or the stark horror message of the second. What it has is Michael Berryman's expression. All the threat, all the intensity of the film seems to be there in his eyes. It's like a challenge. Come see this film. I dare you. And once you get past his expression, you have his almost Neanderthal clothing. But then you notice the dentures, this little grotesque detail that puts this firmly in the present. What I also love is the contrast between Berryman, who could not be more real, and the cast of Scooby-Doo down in the bottom corner. Jinkies, they're about to encounter a very different reality. When it was released, In the Mouth of Madness got a pretty iffy reception from critics and audiences, and ended up being something of a flop for John Carpenter. But I think it's fair to say that over the years its stature has increased, certainly as a cult film. The poster... Okay, here's the thing, because I don't want to be down on it, because I really like the idea, but doesn't this look unfinished? And before you head to the comments section, I know there's another version with more coming out of the book, but that's just cramming on more faces because, as every studio exec knows, the more faces you put on a poster, the better. It feels to me like someone pitched this and said, this is just the concept. Obviously we want to put more on there coming out of the book to really sell the idea that that's what ties it together. And then someone else said, sorry, we need this tomorrow, but don't worry, this is fine. It's a good idea. It's just not all there. A subject we've come back to repeatedly during this countdown is whether or not a poster is an accurate representation of the movie it's advertising, and this one really highlights that question for me. I haven't seen Hereditary. More than that, I don't know the first thing about it, and since we were doing this, I have gone to the trouble of not finding out anything about it, because 3 posters, and hand on heart, if it wasn't for the title and the fact that these are the same actors, I would think they were advertising different movies. This one for me has kind of a witchcraft vibe, maybe even a period horror. Number 2, okay, definitely not period, kind of cabin in the woodsy but more suburban, twisted realities perhaps. This is the one that interests me most. This is the one I might actually go and see. Number 3, this immediately says to me possession, maybe exorcism. And while this is the one that interests me the least, I like the fact that if you hide the eyes on either side, you make a sort of tortured face in the middle that, once you've seen it, you can't unsee. So maybe there's a torture aspect as well. I don't know if any of these descriptions is right. This is like a genuine experiment on the power of the poster. I don't need people to tell me what happens in the film or what it's about, but tell me which of those descriptions is most accurate. More importantly, tell me if all of these posters to you accurately represent the finished film, because if they do, then I just can't get my head around that. Cloverfield is an interesting case study of a poster because the movie was sold very much on mystery, with early reports even suggesting that it might be about 9/11. And I do think that the poster delivers on that non-specific threat. And yet it doesn't quite work for me, for 2 reasons. Firstly, the Statue of Liberty's missing head just makes it seem to me like the poster that Battle for the Planet of the Apes never got. That image is just too iconic for me. But my larger problem is the wake in the water. Posters can tell a story in a single image, and I'm sure this meant to indicate that something has passed this way, but to me it just looks like the Statue of Liberty went into town, got into a bit of a fight, maybe lost her head, but is now back home and going to sleep this one off. In fact, because you can see the smoke from fires in the city and Liberty is carrying a torch, I just feel like it's telling a story that they didn't intend. Either that, or this is a deleted scene from the end of Ghostbusters 2. Sometimes any location will do for a film. Sometimes the location is integral, and sometimes you're Roger Corman, who was offered financial incentives by the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce to shoot there. We're all used to Roger Corman's cost-cutting measures, but was he paying by the word? Beast from Haunted Cave is a strange mashup of crime and horror in which a group of bank robbers stumble into the cave of a giant spider-type creature. And also go skiing. Who wouldn't want to visit South Dakota? Posters like this usually set you up for a fall where the monster is concerned, and I love the way this one has been rendered. It's genuinely otherworldly, and the roughness of the image just makes it seem more visceral. Actually, the monster in the finished film is one of Corman's best, even if it doesn't quite deliver on the poster. Where the poster does overpromise is in the amount of flesh on display. And you've got to wonder at how the human brain works, because anyone seeing this poster at the time had to know they can't show this. But there it is on the poster. I'd better go. I'd never forgive myself if there were boobies and I missed them. This state-by-state setup that we gave ourselves this year means that we have to find a horror film for North Carolina, and we already did The Descent a few years ago. So I guess it's I Know What You Did Last Summer. Great idea for a film, good concept, that deserves better than this generic poster. Fair play, it is better than most posters from the genre of massive pretty people's faces. They do have some expression, except for Ryan Philippe, and it makes good use of colour. The blue, combined with their expressions, does convey some sense of guilt, and the colour contrasts well with the red of the killer in the bottom right. It actually reminds me of a line from the first Sherlock Holmes story. there is a scarlet thread of murder running through the colourless skein of life. There. I think I did a good job of giving some artistic validity to a poster that, ultimately, I simply don't like. With its against-type casting of Sir Patrick Stewart and a great performance from the late Anton Yelchin, Green Room was as savage as it was critically lauded. Its poster is an interesting one for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this is a film about a punk band, and this image is a very conscious reference to The Clash's London Calling album cover, designed by Ray Lowry around the picture by Penny Smith. This, in turn, was a reference to Elvis Presley's debut album, so The Clash seemed to be tearing up rock and roll royalty. Green Room is just taking the image and replacing a guitar with a machete, but maybe there's some intent of capturing that anarchic punk ethos. But that's the other thing, because Green Room is a quite anarchic film, but the image is muted. Bassist Paul Simonon is blurred, it's an action shot, but this is so composed by comparison. Maybe it's the colour too, which you can't really get away from, making it seem almost as if it's underwater. And the thing is, it's so muted, I have to believe that it's a decision and that the designer has seen something in the film that completely passed me by.
It's fine. Just give me a minute. Something terrible.
Which I find interesting, and I don't quite know what to conclude because I like the image. I just feel like I saw a different film. Sometimes all a poster, and particularly a horror film poster, needs is a stark, simple message. I don't know if this is the best reflection of the film, but it's a powerful image. The fact that it eschews a tagline and brushes all the movie stuff down to the bottom where you barely notice it really works for it, because this feels like someone broke into your home and scratched this message on your mirror, and then you turn around and see that figure there in the mask with the machete. You're next. It's a threat, tapping into a primal fear of being attacked in the home where we're supposed to be safe. That said, there is a double meaning if you want to see it, because there's us and them, me and him. And who's to say which of us is saying, you're next? I actually like all the posters for It Follows, but this one is my favourite. The reason I like them is that they all cast us as the follower. We're the one following, we're the one watching from the shadows, and note that penumbra of shadow around Bailey Spry's Annie, turning her into more of a target. Why do I like this one more than the others? I think because it's the most empathetic. We've all been in this situation of walking home alone at night and you hear a noise from behind you, you turn to look, and for a moment there, you don't know what is going to happen next. That fear is universal and instantly identifiable, I think particularly for women. The film really profits from taking an experience that was already scary and making it more so, because when Annie looks around, she sees nothing, but there's still something there.
Mom? No, it's me. Everything's okay.
This isn't a throw everything at it poster. Like You're Next, it's hairs on the back of your neck. It's easy to shock an audience to make them jump. It's easy to hurl blood about and make them wince. But to unnerve them, that's horror. That's it. That's your lot. Maybe next time we'll do English counties. Let us know your favourite state-specific horror movie posters in the comments below. And if you can come up with an alternative poster for every state, then you have way too much time on your hands. Thanks for watching.